Welcome back, Red Top Podcast, Season 2, Episode 5. We're going to switch it up a little, I guess, this week. Obviously, we're still going to talk about fishing because that's the whole point of this. But we're going to switch up the kind of fishing we do and that we're going to kind of hit on. This week, we're going to focus majority of big fish out of the surf. And no, the canal doesn't count as a surf. We're talking about the beach, people. This week, we're joined by one of the best surf fishermen I know. He's a valued customer here at Red Top, big fish catcher, a wetsuit brown shark wrangler. Today, we are joined by Calvin. I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name.
Toran-Sandlin.
Toran-Sandlin.
I've heard worse.
All right. Well, welcome to the podcast, Calvin.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah.
I don't know about all that, other than I have tackled a few brown sharks in a wetsuit. But besides that, yeah, I'm lucky enough to spend a lot of time on the water. That's about it.
Yeah, and I mean, you're kind of the definition of putting your time in. Like me and Ian we've talked a lot this year about like putting your time in, go out every tide, every moon, whatever. If something's different, fish it. And I mean, you're kind of the definition of that. So super excited to have you on this week. I want to start off talking a little bit about your involvement with Ryan at My Fishing Cape Cod. We do our weekly fishing reports on his podcast, so I know you're pretty involved with him. So if you want to dive just a little bit into kind of, how'd you get involved with him? How'd that all kind of start out?
Well, there's honestly not much community when it comes to surf casting. There's a few sites out there, a lot of little groups that exist in certain areas, but to have kind of a larger area like Cape Cod covered by one group of guys, that's a good thing in some ways.
Yeah.
And it's also something you have to be careful of when it comes to the surf in particular. You have to be kind of cognizant of not giving away too much information in regards to specific spots or access points, but just a community where you can spitball ideas and just kind of help build a group of guys who are really into that surf game or into fishing in general, really. It kind of naturally attracted me, and I have kind of enjoyed working with Ryan on some podcasts and doing a little writing for the site and kind of communicating with members through the forum. A couple of the guys I fish with regularly, I met on there. So if you're interested in that kind of community and that group of guys sharing some good information, again, preferably nothing to do with specific spots, give that site a check. Great group of dudes.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not I was a part of the group, I think. God, this is probably going back 2018?
Yeah.
2017? Back when he was doing the Costa Rica trips.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is, especially if you're new to fishing. I mean, obviously, if you're experienced, it's great to get on there and talk with other guys because you can kind of spitball ideas. But especially back then, with me, like, just getting into the beach fishing, there's a lot of people on there who share a lot of good info. And I don't mean spots. I mean just technique and, whatever you have questions to, there's people on there who are willing to answer it, which is pretty nice. Because you don't get that in the person to person when it comes to surf fishing.
Yeah,
everyone's super tight-lipped.
That's what I tell people. We were out there on a beach last Saturday, just doing kind of a surf fishing 101, me and Ryan and a group of guys. And it's very low-key, informal, just ask your questions, get some answers, try to point you in the right direction. We're not trying to blow it up into getting too specific when it comes to techniques and all that.
Yeah.
Just something to get you pointed in the right direction. The same thing you're doing with this podcast at times. It's really a good resource for that guy who's trying to start out. And then as you get better, or maybe you pursue it, you become dedicated, you can continue to use it as a resource.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, surf fishing. It's
what we do mostly now.
It's what we do mostly. If we're not absolutely goofing off at the canal, we are.
But why not just go on a boat?
In the wetsuit. I got one of those too. But kind of like what got you into surf fishing? Obviously, I would assume you fished the canal
Yeah.
at some point in your life. I feel like everybody does.
I feel like it's hard to be Cape Cod
And-
surf caster or fisher, angler, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
who hasn't at least taken a good look at the canal.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's the highway of the migration.
I was in high school when I started fishing the canal, and that's what I did pretty regularly for several years.
Sure.
I got away from the whole topwater plugging thing real quick, and I would just go any night I had free between the moons, bounce jigs on the bottom. That's what I did, was just bouncing heavy lead.
Okay.
I mean, I probably came into Red Top and bought 100 pounds of lead over the years.
Oh, I believe it.
4 and 5 ounce jig heads and snagged them all on the bottom, right?
Now you buy all our hooks.
right, yeah. Now I'm changing out 200 hooks a season just for the plugs and everything.
Yeah. So what kind of like got you into surf fishing? Like what made you make the jump over to the beach?
Well, there's nothing else like it, man. Like the
There isn't.
canal is.
There's nothing else like the canal.
The canal's
But-
an interesting community. I'll say
Yeah.
that. Like it's a unique experience, and if you're into that, all power to you. That's just not kind of my vibe anymore.
No?
I don't like playing with the crowds. It has become a little too report chasey for me. Too much attitude down there, personality. A lot of times I go out there to fish at night just to be alone.
Yeah.
Like if you're in the right spot, there's no one else there.
No.
I'm putting on a wetsuit. I'm swimming out to structure. You're standing on a rock that you swam out to that's 50 yards, 100 yards offshore on a new moon night, and that temperature drops and that fog rolls in, and suddenly you can't see the shoreline behind you. That's
had that
complete
happen.
isolation, right? Like
Yeah.
there's
Yeah, that
no
happened
other
all the time.
experience
We had
like
that happen last week.
Yeah.
The last new moon, we were out on a spot in Buzzards Bay, and literally I looked at Ian. I was like, Ian, look at the fog. And within seconds, we were surrounded, and we weren't even far off
We
the
couldn't
shore.
see each
We were
other.
probably 20 yards off the beach, and you couldn't see the house behind you.
you're watching the lights down the shoreline. You're giving it a 30-second count as that light goes down.
Yeah.
Before you reach 30,
Exactly.
the fog bank is just completely engulfed.
Yeah.
It's just such a unique experience, man. And like if you want to get up close and personal with the fish, surf casting is the way to do it,
Especially in the wetsuit.
especially in the wet.
Did you start out when you
Uh,
moved to the beach? You started in the wetsuit
I
right away?
basically did, yeah.
Okay.
I was already training long distance swimming at the time.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty comfortable in the water.
Sure.
The wetsuit was just a natural way for me to do it.
Yeah.
There have been rocks that I've been eyeing since 10 years ago. And some of the first nights were just swimming out to those rocks. I had a old St. Croix Mojo. I had a Penn 704 I packed with grease. Like the old timers, I thought I was cool,
There
right?
you go.
And just a bag of eels, and I was swimming out to rocks and
Yeah.
just kind of went from there.
And I know eels are your
Forte.
your forte, if
A
you will.
lot of the time.
But when you're throwing plugs, what would you say? And I know you yelled at me for this earlier when you came in. What are your favorite beach plugs? Or I guess what are your most
Productive.
not productive? I guess we'll go with productive. I don't know the word I'm looking for.
I'll segue that for 1 second.
Okay.
People get on this idea that you need one particular plug. This builder is making the hot plug,
Yeah,
and that's
of
all that's
course.
going to catch a fish. Dude, the fish don't care what brand it is.
No.
It's a profile that fits whatever bait they're feeding on, and it works under whatever set of conditions you're working.
Sure.
I mean, okay, I have bunker moving offshore in front of me, and it's a calm, glassy night. I can see them finning on the surface. Well, probably going to throw something like a metal lip. That's kind of that classic match the hatch to take
Yeah.
the whole trout fishery saying, and it's likely going to produce. If that's not producing, then I'm going to have to rethink, try to find something that will tune in on those fish. But a lot of times it will produce. You switch that up, that same set of conditions as far as what the fish are feeding on and what the bait is doing, but you put a 20-mile-an-hour headwind in your face. You're not going to hit that bait. You're not
No.
going to hit those fish with a metal lip.
No.
You're going to need to find a profile that still matches that bait, something like a bottle plug, something like a really big fat needle or a jig that can punch out through the wind and kind of mimic that profile. So it just comes down to kind of understanding how those conditions interact and how the fish interact
Sure.
and finding something that works.
Sure.
For me, to answer your question, I fish a lot of skinny water, typically boulder fields, outflows. I like structure, and I like hard structure preferably, whether that's boulders or rock shelves or offshore reefs, whatever it is. So skinny water usually means darters, something like a super strike darter, metal lips, bottles if I have to reach out, and needles if I have to reach out. And it comes down really to having a rotation that works for each spot, and then understanding how you just might tweak it given the situation or given the conditions.
Okay. And actually, I didn't even write this down. Do you throw any glide baits?
I've been recently getting into glide baits.
Okay.
We just did too.
We just did.
We just started.
It was never something that really kind of factored into my equation,
Mhm.
just because I catch on everything else that I throw.
Sure.
And I'm a creature of habit, dude. It's the reason I'm still throwing eels so regularly.
Yeah.
Like, sure, I can catch on soft plastics really well, but I love to feel that tap of a bass hitting an eel.
Sure.
It's just part of the whole experience for me. So glide baits are something I've kind of worked in. There's definitely scenarios where they work really well. This spring on bass that are feeding on herring in very skinny water, almost those situations where you can sight feed bass at night.
Yeah.
A glide bait just worked just under the surface is a great representation of that.
Sure.
And it's readily taken by the fish, so that works really well. But it's something I would have to experiment with more before I can really kind of talk about glide baits in depth.
Sure. Yeah, just because we just started to do it this year, which I'm not doing it anymore because I just can't do it. I had a poor experience my first time with one, so I'm not going to talk about it. I'm still in pain. I'm still in pain.
And it was an expensive custom one, right?
It was.
Yeah, it was. It always is. I'm lucky. I only lost a sluggo last night, so I'm only down a few.
Yeah, down like $20 if it was a pre-rig. Now I already know the answer to this question, but I want to know why. Other than that, you're a creature of habit. You throwing eels or soft plastics?
Why am I throwing a live eel versus a soft plastic? A live eel is going to take big fish when nothing else will.
Okay.
Almost always. I can probably count on one hand nights where I had eels and plugs with me, and the plugs outproduced the eels. The instance in particular was situation on Cape Cod. We don't usually see mullet, but we had mullet push in sometime mid-September or early October.
Yeah.
And I'm throwing eels all night and just getting a few scuffs here and there, nothing really going on. Run out of eels and start throwing I think it was a super strike darter, and just start hitting fish on every cast. It's the same tide I'm fishing, same conditions. I mean, those fish were sitting in front of me the whole time. They're just very keyed in on one bait.
Sure.
The vast majority of the time, that's not the rule. The vast majority of the time, big bass is going to take an eel if you drip that thing in front of its face.
Now, my question for you, do you prefer riggies, like rigged eels, or do you prefer live eels? Or does it matter on the situation as well?
That depends on the conditions. A riggy is a little bit easier to present if you have heavy wind in your face, or if you have big white water. The other thing with riggies is it's kind of a broad topic. Like, you could talk rigging eels as far as like the classic 2 hooks with Dacron run through them. You could rig them on a wobble head. You could rig them on a jig head. You could skin them and put them on a plug. So I can take a 3-ounce needle, put a eel skin on that, and really punch it into a headwind.
Yeah.
Where I'm never going to achieve that with a live eel.
Sure.
A live eel casts like a bag of potato chips. I mean,
yeah, oh yeah,
it really does.
Unloaded redfin type of
unloaded redfin.
Yeah.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, take a loaded redfin, put an eel skin on it, and you have a deadly shallow water presentation. But as far as like when I'm going to choose live eels, anytime the situation allows me to fish live eels, I'm going to fish live eels if that's the way I want to fish that night.
Okay.
Riggies are a thing of convenience. Grab them out of the freezer or however you store them and go.
Sure.
You don't have to worry about getting to the shop after work or whatever.
Yeah.
And then in certain situations, I keep them rigged on classic eel bob style weighted set up so that I can really fish deeper water, or that I can get into that different set of conditions.
Okay. And I know you said a little bit about eel skins there. How, I guess I want to ask a question about eel skins because I don't know anything about them. I don't know what to ask you. I guess just tell me about eel skins.
I mean, you're just taking...
You're just reskinning a plug with
You're
eel skin?
taking a plug that already will probably catch a fish, and you're giving it another like layer of life that is going to make it even more effective. I mean...
And why? Is it the scent? Is it the look?
I don't think it's the scent at all.
Okay.
Not particularly. I really think scent is pretty low on my personal set of factors that I consider in the surf.
Sure.
I know guys who are rubbing some kind of jelly or scent on their baits and fishing them. To me,
it's more of a mental thing.
I'm fishing a new moon night, wind in my face. I have sweep. I have white water. That fish is reacting in a kind of primal instinct at a split-second silhouette that's going by its face.
Yeah.
Maybe scent is a factor. I mean, bunker chunkers would tell you it is. But
yeah, don't be saying that around Bob, dude. Bob the garbage man rip your head off right now.
Again,
we got the chunk sticker over here.
I got the chunk sticker on the back of my car
there
right now.
You go.
As far as the like scent goes, I'm more worried about profile presentation,
sure.
The silhouette of the bait.
Okay.
When it comes to eel skins, you're just dressing up that bait. You're making it look like something the striped bass wants to eat.
Sure.
And a lot of times, like metal lips of the classic eel skin, you're taking advantage of the action of that plug to give life to that eel skin.
Okay.
Very effective presentation in a lot of situations.
Sure.
And for instance, I can run an eel skin on a surface swimming metal lip. A live eel, it's going to be a little harder to keep that guy on the surface. I'm going to have to do a fast retrieve.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm fishing really skinny water, last 3 hours of the drop over shallow bars, for instance, that eel might just be digging into the bottom. That metal lip or that redfin is just going to cruise right over, create that presentation, create that wake, and it's got that eel skin for kind of like to seal the deal when the fish makes that commitment.
Just a little bit of spice.
A little bit of spice.
On top of the plug.
Or maybe it's the whole deal. I don't know.
No, who knows?
I just know it works and it catches a lot of fish.
Yeah. Do you notice that, like, I guess if you're fishing eels, are they keyed in on eels, or is it more of a just reaction bite because eels piss them off?
So boulder fields are typically not going to be a place where you're talking about kind of these migratory schooling baits.
Okay.
Mackerel, herring, bunker. Yeah, you might run into them. In the spring, you might have herring push through a boulder field. I had bunker in front of me the other night. But I'm not going out every night saying, oh, this is going to be a bunker bite, right?
Yeah.
The fish are feeding on resident bait fish. Eels are one of those resident bait fish, as are scup and tautog and sea bass and sea robins and fluke and lobster. All of these things that are going to be in that boulder field 100% of the time throughout the season, that's what the bass are feeding on.
Okay.
And the bass are sitting in that same boulder field throughout the tide. You might have a window of the tide where they're feeding because they take advantage of that, say, slack water period to move through and to feed, or they take advantage of moving water to let bait get pushed to them as they stage and opportunistically feed. It's going to depend spot to spot, and that really comes to just developing a profile of where you're fishing. But an eel is just another one of those resident baits. Like, you'll see them occasionally in boulder fields. Go flip rocks during the day, and you'll see juvenile eels under them.
Sure. I saw a thing that was like I remember we talked early in the spring about it. I think it was with Jared, but the glass eels.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He did like an Instagram video about how like a pound of glass eels is like $2,000. You could sell a pound of glass eels for $2,000. You just have to go out with a net and just find them. It was like a case or something. Somebody was like smuggling like 200 pounds of. It was like $7 million worth of glass eels, which that was a fun fact. I didn't know that until I saw that video randomly. I thought that was pretty wild. But while we're on the eel topic, I know while you're out in these wonderful boulder fields you find, you tend to get some bycatch sometimes. What are you doing in a wetsuit playing with brown sharks?
Well, I'm not making the choice. The sharks are making the choice. If I choose to throw a live eel during July and August, and that's a great bait in July and August because those fish become finicky,
Yeah.
and the eel just seems to
Just
entice
works.
bites when nothing else will.
Sure.
I can drag a metal lip over their face all day long. They're probably not going to hit it.
Yeah.
The brown sharks like to eat eels, possibly more than the bass, because I've had nights where I've had 2 bass and 10 brown sharks, and
Do you find the brown sharks eat the bass too?
I've had that happen too.
Okay.
I've had 25, 30-pound bass that are taken 3-4 feet in front of me by a pretty sizable shark. And that just comes down to reevaluating. Am I standing in the right place at this point? Should I get back to the shore? Should I get on a boulder that's a little bit more elevated above the water line? You got to have those conversations. 90% of the time, and I fish pretty stout tackle, 90% of the time, because you're fishing really snaggy structure in these boulder fields, you're going to break the sharks off.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that, honestly. If I'm having a lot of sharks come around, I'm probably going to move. I don't want to leave a bunch of fish trailing 80-pound mono and hooks and all that.
Sure.
But once in a while, you'll actually manage to turn one. And if you manage to turn one, I fish solitary a lot of the time. That's the fun part, is trying to actually land that fish. Like, you have to do something with it. You could cut your line, but me personally, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to land the shark. I mean, I've already fought it this far, so it's just part of the experience, dude.
Something else. That we haven't ran into that yet, but we've gotten bumped by them.
Oh yeah,
swim into it.
Yeah, I've had them swim into me.
Yeah,
I've had one that just would not leave me alone, circling the rock all night, and it's because he can smell eels. Like, I'm dipping my eel bag once in a while into the water.
And the thing
As
is,
soon as I dip it, he comes over.
Yeah, and it's like they're not there trying to bite you. They don't want to.
They
They
really
have no
don't.
interest in you. It's the fact that it's freaking wild. I can't even think about it. Just catching sharks in a wetsuit. I can barely even stand half the time, let alone catch a freaking 7-foot brown shark.
Those they don't give a damn about you. They don't.
No, they
care
don't
about
at
you.
all.
They want an easy meal, and you're
Yeah.
presenting an easy meal, whether that's an eel or a bass.
Or you.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
the-
Have you ever had them try to grab your eel bag?
what's that?
Have you ever had them grab your bag?
At all opportunities, if I have the chance and I'm moving through water
Keep
that I
it out of the
know
water.
have sharks in it, I throw that eel bag over my shoulder.
Okay.
The rest of the season, it stays on my waistline. I just kind of tuck it up out of the way.
Sure.
But if there's sharks in that water, I preferably try to keep it
Out
as much scent as much as possible.
Sure.
Just because, these fish aren't looking for humans. This isn't Jaws, but
Could be.
if a shark takes a swing at an eel bag and gets your calf, you're in a really bad situation really quickly.
Well, yeah.
Just-
I mean,
Well,
hence
that's
the
why we
reason.
both carry tourniquets. Then.
We-
That's why I carry a tourniquet.
There we
Tourniquet.
go.
Carry a tourniquet where both hands can reach it.
Yep.
That's the rule with a tourniquet.
Mine's right on my.
That-
Okay.
I never thought about that actually.
It has to be
Mine-
where you can
right.
get it in 10 seconds and both hands can reach it.
Yep.
And you have to know how to use it. Otherwise, don't bother carrying it.
Yeah, know how to use it. My car is actually like a. You call it a small hospital.
Yeah,
I'll get you there. You ain't gonna look too good when you get there, but you'll be alive.
Hey, dude, I've used electrical tape and super glue in a pinch.
Yep, I've got electrical tape, super glue.
Quick claw.
I got an extra tourniquet. I got some quick clot, which the quick clot's not the pretty part.
You don't want
That's-
quick clot unless you really need quick clot.
Yeah, that's a quick screech of pain, and we'll get you to the hospital. You'll probably be passed out, but you'll be all right. But anyway, I think it's absolutely insane that you do that. I kind of hope I get the chance to do it, but I know my Genesis cannot turn one of those.
They must serve heavy and Gosa out there.
My 1207 could, but that Genesis is way too moderate to turn one of those sharks.
I mean, my go-to for big bass in the boulders is 121M.
Okay.
And I'm throwing 50-pound or 65-pound braid, 80-pound leaders across the board.
So
I can turn one of these sharks. Most of the time I don't, but I can.
Yeah, just because of the structure.
Yeah, it's the structure. You're not going to win that fight a lot of the time.
No. So I know your approach to the beach is, I guess, kind of unconventional. Like, what are some I guess weird ways, or I don't want to say secret things you do, but like, what are some weird things that you do that maybe the average fisherman isn't thinking of?
Man, the only secret is most of the time, if you're looking for big fish, you're not going to catch anything. Like that's just across the board.
That's why Ian doesn't catch big fish, because he's always looking for them.
Yeah, well, like if you're going out regularly looking for big fish, they're few and far between nowadays.
Yeah.
Like that's just the reality.
Especially on the beach.
Unfortunately, yeah, we don't have all the equipment that a boat would have to actually track these fish down. So we're going off of just patterns, wind and tide and moon phase, whatever it is.
Sure.
And we're trying to create kind of a workable situation out of these patterns. And a lot of the times the fish just, maybe you misjudge, maybe they're not there, maybe they're not feeding, who knows? But the trick to catching big fish, I'm not going to say consistently, is just to fish and to keep track of what you're doing out there. And if you find something that works, really take note of it.
Yeah.
And don't just take note of it, try to figure out why it worked in that scenario, because then you can take that and blow it out to any number of other spots or any number of situations and think, this worked here, how can I adapt it to work here?
Yeah.
Right?
Do you keep a log?
Rudimentary. Like,
okay.
I do my best when you're fishing 5 or 6 nights a week and then you work and you have a life and everything.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not jotting down freaking barometer changes throughout
I
the
got
season.
17 mile an hour, 42 degree wind,
I'm not
and the
doing
water
that.
temperature was 50.57 degrees. Yeah.
A lot of the time, like I'll take some quick notes and sometimes I lose them, right? But if I have good pictures, a lot of times on my phone, I like to take a picture here and there of a decent fish. Sure. A lot of times that's just enough to jog the memory. Hey, this was the date. And I have an idea what the conditions were.
Now you have on your phone, it tells you the location of the picture.
Well, that's a whole nother story,
whether
we like that or not, right? But
yeah, I mean, as long as you don't send anyone the picture, I guess. Yeah. Crap, I just had a question. What do you consider a decent fish?
What would I consider a decent fish?
Yep.
Depends on how many decent fish I've had in that past week, right?
That's fair.
If I've had a slow week at 20-pound, 15-pound fishes, I'm pretty happy, dude. But like a really quality fish, and I don't catch many of them, I would say a 40-pound fish is a really good quality fish.
Yeah, I mean,
especially from the surf, that's a good quality fish. 30-pounders are great. And I had a really good season last year. I had a handful of 40s, and I had some very consistent 30-pound fish. But yeah, you're always looking for that bigger one, right? And for me, I haven't found that bigger one yet, but that's what keeps you going out.
I think you will, especially this year. Although it's been very weird this year. Like, we haven't.
I've had most of my fish this year from the beach. I've either hooked in the forehead, or they're just grabbing it. Like, they're not eating it, they're just bumping it.
That's like a non-committal fish. Like, you're just snagging them essentially at that point.
Yeah, well, lots of fish have been non-committal this year, and it sucks.
I think a lot of it has to do with just, I mean, we're fishing from the beaches. We're fishing inshore. So that's that cold water and that wind and air temperature and all the rain we've had is just amplified these inshore waters. It's becoming difficult, fields, dude, right? Like, it's a difficult set of conditions for an early spring. I've had a slow start to my season too. I'm still picking through fish, but at this point I've kind of moved to the point where I don't care about those slot class fish that are sitting on herring. Yeah. I've caught a few, right? Yeah. Like you've had your fun.
Sure.
So now I'm going out every night, going to these spots that I know will at some point hold a big fish. And that some point could be tonight or it could be a week from now.
Sure.
But at some point on the right tide, under the right set of conditions, there will be big fish sitting there. So I'm just going to start going to those spots until they show up.
Okay. Yeah, I've noticed this year, it seems like the bigger fish are pretty like slow moving. Like the little fish hauled ass up here.
Oh, yeah.
Got here and we've got plenty of them. And there's some 40-inch fish like around the canal and in the canal. Whether or not you want to count those is up to you. But like those 20, 30, 40-pound fish are lagging so far
There's
behind
been some
this
caught,
year.
but it's not.
No, it's like I've heard of maybe 3 or 4. I've heard of one big beach fish, and I've heard of maybe 2 decent fish in the canal and 1 out on the boat.
I mean, there's going to be some caught. You have enough guys going out there.
Yeah.
They're going to intercept those first big fish that
Yeah,
are moving
totally.
through. And those big fish are starting to roll into our waters right now.
Yeah.
Like, that's just a fact. Due to the date and due to the water temperature, they are. It just comes down to they might be holding a little farther off, or they might be on very specific kind of bait patterns right now. And sooner or later, as they move into that kind of late spring, early summer pattern of actually staging into structure, feeding heavily in boulder fields or wherever they might be, that's when you'll start to see more big fish caught from shore.
Yeah.
And that's the pattern I'm looking for right now.
Okay. Well, geez. This is probably one of our shorter podcasts, but it had so much in it. We just talked about so much.
That was fun.
It was a lot of fun. But all right, I'm going to end it here unless anybody else has anything to add. Any takers? No. All righty.
Particularly get out there and fish sooner or later,
Yeah, get out there, fish. The big fish are coming. If they are not here already, maybe they got there while we were filming this podcast. Who knows? But get out there, go fish. Make sure you check the description. I'll link some plugs and stuff we talked about in the podcast down there. I hope you guys enjoyed, and make sure you visit us at redtopinc.com if you cannot make it to the store. Alrighty, guys. We'll see you next week.